want to try a little experiment. If you put a glaze of yellow under your red, it will make your red look brighter. Hi, Parker. Do you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody.
Oh, there's that red. Oh, that's an opera. Now we will try the yellow. I'm gonna try this one too. I can definitely see that the red with the yellow under is definitely much richer. It almost glows with redness. This yellow with the pink over it looks almost red. It's a very red orange, and it really has a beautiful glow to it.
Would you love to add more glow and creative color, kind of like what you see in these paintings? Would you like your colors to have more depth, to look like they're vibrating and alive from within, but you just feel like your colors are falling flat, your paintings are not having that beautiful watercolor glow that you would like to achieve? Well, in today's video, we're going to talk about how to use the power of an underpainting to achieve these goals and so much more. In fact, I'm going to talk to you about 3 ways that you can improve your paintings using a powerful underpainting. And the information that I'm going to share in this video is not only useful just to watercolorists, but it will be useful across many mediums, any medium where you use an underpainting. I know oil painters, acrylic painters, colored pencil, pastel, all those mediums require an underpainting usually. So this may be helpful to you all as well. All right, before we talk about how to use your underpainting to improve your work, let's talk about what an underpainting is. Usually it's the very first bit of painting that you do on a totally blank piece of paper or canvas. A lot of times your underpainting won't really even hardly be able to be seen in the final piece of work, but it's so important for future stages of the painting process. And unless you're working in an alla prima way, like I used with this butterfly, and I'll show that here. And this, by the way, is a tutorial on my Patreon, and I painted it alla prima, which means basically all in one go. It's the way Charles Reed paints, and I've been trying to work that way more and more. But traditionally, I work in many layers, and I still do for certain styles of painting, like the ones I've been entering in national competitions. And I'll tell you a little bit about that journey too today. So that's what an underpainting is. Now let's talk about how you can use it to improve your paintings. And there's several different ways. And I've been really getting playful with my underpaintings lately. Let me show you some footage of me really pushing the envelope to create a really beautiful underpainting that hopefully will shine through till the very end. And I was able to achieve that with my latest commission that I did, Sam the Tuxedo. So let's take a look and see how I painted this underpainting and how it affected the final piece. One of my students showed me her notebook that she made just about everything that she was learning from my tutorial because it was a little overwhelming. They're almost like courses, which normally would cost $200. So yeah, it is a good deal for you to get it at just the $8 level. And that is why soon it will move to the $13 and maybe even the $30 tiers. And there's over 100 other tutorials that are available. I've left a lot of my older tutorials at the $5 Patreon level because either because I just think they're good, they're just so good, and I just want a lot of people to be able to access them. You will learn a lot about watercolor painting, and it will help you create your own style. All right, back to our regularly scheduled programming, and here we are back at footage of me painting Sam, a memorial commission I recently finished and shared with my online students. But there are 3 main things I want to talk about in regards to what can be achieved with an underpainting, which is to set the mood for you as an artist, to create a layer that will glow up through subsequent layers to enrich and enliven colors, and to establish a color scaffolding that will make your painting hang together as a cohesive whole when it's complete. So I'll weave discussion of these throughout the rest of the video, but in regards to Sam, I had a specific goal I was trying to achieve, which was to have a really interesting color scheme that gave this piece an artistic flair and to avoid a problem that can often be encountered when painting black or white animals, boring or blah color. I felt like because Sam is black and white, this particular painting would give me an opportunity to play with colors that a brown or yellow-based colored animal would be harder to do. So I really pushed the colors I used and made them really eye-popping to add interest and flair to the final piece. I remember feeling quite nervous about it, but I just told myself that if it didn't work out, I could always paint Sam again using more traditional color palette. While we're at it, let's talk about the nuts and bolts, the why of why I'm choosing these colors. Where I see cools in the reference photo and also where the fur is black, I use a lot of blues and purples. That way, when I paint black or darker colors on top of those blues and purples, the underpainting acts much like when you're painting a house or the walls in your house and start out with primer. That helps the color be even richer and smoother and pure white and not look blotchy. So primer does that on the walls of your house when you're painting. Same thing with an underpainting. An underpainting just lays the scaffolding to make subsequent layers look better. So if I painted black right onto white paper, it would look more washed out and flat. But if I paint blue and other colors under it, the subsequent black will have more drama, look richer, and not so flat. By the way, Windsor Violet is also a beautiful color to put under black fur or other black elements in your painting. You also see me allowing the first layer to dry and then painting green over it. Technically, that's not the underpainting, but I will add subsequent layers over that as I build details on top of this underpainting. Next, you'll see me add hot pink, specifically Holbein Opera, which, by the way, must be sprayed with a fixative or put under UV protective glass because it is fugitive. This is a signature color I added to really add flair to this painting and also balance out the red in the nose and ears so the painting hangs together. But I also looked at my reference, and if I used my imagination, I could see that the fur was warmer here and lighter, which coincides with how I want to treat this area as a supportive part of the painting, because it is away from the main point of interest, the cat's eyes. So I don't want super darks here. I don't want a lot of contrast, but I do want something soft and pretty that will support the rest of the painting and also give it a pop of color. So that is my thinking behind the why, not just the how of choosing this color and putting it where I did. And also this color is very different from the yellow of the eyes, so that will help them vibrate together. And that is very important to make those eyes really pop. And by the way, let me show you another one that I'm working on. Recently, I have been so happy to be juried into some national and international level competitions. In fact, my painting Juicy Fruit recently got juried into Women in Watercolor, which they had over 1,600, they had over 1,800 entries and only 200 were chosen to get in. So it is a huge honor to get in this show. The competition is amazing. If you go look at the show, I will link that here and in the description below if I'm not able to link it here. So you can go look at womeninwatercolor.com and see all the beautiful entries there. But this year I was able to get my painting Juicy Fruit in. And the reason why Juicy Fruit was so effective is because I had a really effective underpainting. And I remember, even though it's been over 10 years since I painted that, I remembered my thinking process for that painting. And I want to reproduce that painting, in fact, for my Patreon students. But let's get back to how I painted this zebra's underpainting, because it's the closest tutorial to how I painted Juicy Fruit years ago. By the way, I painted this on student grade paper by Hippie Crafter. And in order to practice these techniques, it really does take miles on the brush. So find a student grade paper you like and paint, paint, paint. So just like when I painted Juicy Fruit, I look at the colors in the area and decide, are they warm or cool? Do I see the area already hinting at a color that I can then zhuzh up times 10 or times 100 even? So first I paint the areas that I saw on the zebra as being cool, and notice I paint the background and zebra all at the same time. By the way, I'm painting this first layer on dry paper with tea consistency paint. I do have a whole video about techniques you can utilize when painting with tea consistency paint, and I'll link that video here. Remember, when you click on the link, it will not take you out of this video, but rather queue it up for you to watch later. But then notice I painted green under his jaw as if the green grass was throwing a green shadow on him, which really actually does happen. So it's not too much of a stretch to paint that area green. Then where the sun hits him, it makes sense that that area is warm. And if you look at the reference photo, you may be surprised to notice that you don't have to imagine much to see the oranges, reds, and yellows in his forehead and top of his face. Then I had a dash of purple in the shadow on his shoulder, which is also a cool color, but I'm using a bit of artistic flair to push that color a bit beyond blue. So that is the same way I interpreted the reference I painted that ultimately led to getting my painting Juicy Fruit into an international level show. I've been really inspired lately by getting into these big shows. It's such a big deal that it's emboldening me to get more creative, get more experimental, to develop my style more. And so I'm taking bigger risks. And that means bigger failures too, which is scary. But if you watch my videos, I talk about it all the time. You have to fall on your face. You have to make mistakes because it's in your mistakes that your style will emerge. At least that's according to Jerry Saltz, Pulitzer Prize winning art critic. Let's look at some of the footage that I did for this painting because I also started with a very creative, very experimental underpainting with Windsor green gold. Who knew you could use Windsor green gold as an underpainting for a portrait? But I've been playing with it and it's kind of working. I kind of love it. So here's where it is today. This is like, I don't know. I would say this is half done. Yes, he still kind of looks like a zombie. No, he won't look like a zombie at the end of this painting, and it might still be a failure. But I have to experiment this way or else I will not move forward on my own artistic journey, which I am most certainly on. So let's take a little bit of a peek at my process for this Parker painting and what I've been thinking and how I really used the power of a very creative underpainting to guide me through the next stages of this painting. This is a painting of my son Parker, whom I actually talked a lot about in a more recent...
Shh, be quiet, boo. Okay, let me do my voiceover, okay?
Do you want to say hi? Say hi.
Hi. Hi.
Okay. All right. This is a painting of my son Parker, whom I actually talked a lot about in a recent, more personal video about my journey to motherhood, which I'll link here. But it would tickle me to someday get a painting of Parker into a national competition. So when I'm painting Parker, I really do push the experimental envelope even harder, especially since I'm not painting for anyone but myself, which is really fun. Another part of it, I think, is that I like to create a mess and see if I can get out of it. And this underpainting will soon get very scary. I start out with an almost neon first wash of Windsor green gold, which leads me to one of the first surprises this painting gave me, which is that Windsor green gold mixes pretty well with both blue and red. Since it leans green, I didn't think it would make a pretty orange when mixed with red, but it surprised me. Notice also how I'm painting around a few white highlights where I keep the painting perfectly dry so that I will have a few fresh sparkles of pure, clean white paper here and there, namely where the lightest highlights are in Parker's face. Again, as I paint Parker, I also paint the background to lend continuity to the piece. I also drop in a little bit of Holbein opera here and there in the medium tone areas to add supersonic glow. At least that is what I'm hoping for here. Often during the underpainting stage, I will go ahead and add some thicker paint to the dark areas. And here you see me dropping in some thick cream consistency burnt sienna to the areas that have darker shadows. Another new idea, at least new to me, is the use of green in skin tones. I've noticed a few really good artists use green in skin tones, which seemed shocking when I first saw it. But then I started taking closer looks at my references to see if I could imagine where I could use green. And when I looked with green-seeking eyes, I did find green. So this is one of the first paintings, at least the first portraits, I'm trying green in the skin tones. This last bit of footage I'm showing you is the process of where we start heading back to sanity by putting in details like the eyes and refining important aspects of this piece, like softening edges and lifting out highlights. So this painting isn't done, but be sure to check out my community tab once in a while where I post a lot more updates, polls, and other fun things, especially weeks like the last couple of weeks while I was mired in tax hell. I do post a lot on my community tab, so you can keep in touch with me a lot better there. But anyway, be sure to check out my shorts too, because I always put some of my juiciest secrets and insights there. So this was a pretty crazy underpainting. And before I show you a more straightforward classic one that is more beginner friendly, let's look at another crazy underpainting. that I did. And I did this over 10 years ago. And if I did this painting over again, I would do it different. I would use yellow instead of red. And I did a whole short about how yellow can enliven your reds. But still, this painting came out very lively. It hung together well. Wait till you see what I did to start this painting of a cardinal bird. Roll 'em, Rach. All right, look at this. I am painting almost the entire painting red. That's crazy. But it worked so well because I let all that dry. And then after it all dried, I added on subsequent layers of darker colors, grayer colors, blues in the background. And then that red just vibrated up through the painting in such an amazing, beautiful way. And yes, this tutorial, I will link it down in the description below. It's an old tutorial. It was 10 years ago. I did tutorials years ago, then I stopped for a long time. So it's really poor quality footage, but it's fun to see how I painted this underpainting. And for painting that underpainting with the red really held the composition together for the rest of the painting because there was red everywhere in that painting. I wouldn't suggest always doing that, but for this painting, it really worked. And the little bits of red throughout the painting made the whole thing hold together really well. And it made the background really glow in an interesting way because it had that underpainting of red glowing up through the other layers of blue that I subsequently put on it. And then that red bird was just so powerful and really red. But if I were to paint this again, I might first do an underpainting of yellow, because if you paint an underpainting of yellow and then add red on top of it, your red is really going to glow. So try that, experiment with that, and get back to me and leave a comment below about your experiments and what you found to work with your underpaintings. I would love to hear from you, by the way. All right, sometimes you need to be a little bit more conservative with your underpainting. Sometimes you don't want to be completely creative, and I'll show you a little example of a tutorial and a painting, a commission that I'm working on right now that is not finished, but it's of a golden retriever. I think it's, yeah, right back here. Let me show you. Come here, little guy. So I actually asked the client if I could get a little creative with this, and they're like, no, because it's a gift. So I don't know if they would like that. So I was like, okay, even if you're not getting crazy creative with your underpainting is really going to be important. And so let's talk about just kind of the nuts and bolts now about painting and underpainting and how to choose the colors. If you are more of a beginner, you might not be ready to get creative with crazy bold colors in your underpainting, and that's probably smart. You want to first learn how to use an underpainting, and then you can start breaking the rules. So we're going to work backwards in true Rachel style of talking about all the fun ways to break the rules, and now here are the rules. Because this painting really follows the rules. So let's take a look at some of the footage of me painting this. And I started in a classic underpainting for this guy where I wet pretty much the entire thing. And I know I want soft, dreamy edges, even for a traditional conservative portrait, if you have a dog that you're painting anyway. And most paintings need, in fact, this is what Charles Reed says, half of your edges should be soft and loose and melting together, and half of them should be hard. And most of your hard edges are going to be in the area of interest. So when you first start your painting with your underpainting, you can establish where you're going to have the hard and soft edges. And the way that I did it with this painting is I pretty much wet everything. I think I painted around the areas that needed to be hard edges, like the white parts of the mouth and things like that, where the hard edges needed to be hard to save those details, but the rest was all wet. And then I dropped my paint in and let the edges especially melt together softly. So I dropped in first a yellow and burnt sienna mix, because that is the main color that is beneath this whole dog. Even in the reference photo, there is definitely a theme of his fur color that goes throughout his fur. So everywhere on this dog, I first painted that underlying theme. So when you're trying to decide on what your underpainting color should be, choose colors that are similar to what you want the final color to be, or a color that will make them look richer. And often that color is yellow. In general, the way to choose your underpainting color is look at your reference. Is the area you're painting the underpainting for warm or cool? If it's warm, you can start with a yellow. If it's cooler, you might want to start with a blue. It just depends on what color in the long run that area is going to need to be. If you want that area to eventually look gray, then you can use a complementary color that will really add some pop to the final color you put on it. Like, for example, in these darker shadows that are cooler than the rest of the dog, I could have done the underpainting there blue and it would have been very effective. And then where the sun is hitting the dog, where his fur looks even more bright orange than it actually is, I might do an underpainting of yellow. So usually areas hit by light or that are really warm have an underpainting of yellow, orange, or red. And then shadow areas might have an underpainting of blue or purple even to get started. And I have seen another artist do an underpainting of purple for the shadows. It makes perfect sense. And then on top of it, you can layer warmer colors. All right, I hope some of those ideas gave you a good jumping off point to improve your effectiveness of your underpaintings, and I hope it adds a whole nother dimension to your work. I'd love to hear from you in the comments and let me know what you think of this video and what you would like to see in the future. And until next time, go watercolor your world, and be sure to subscribe to learn not just the how, but the why of watercolor so you move along your artistic journey a lot faster. And I'd love to hear a comment. Please like this video. If you don't want to join my Patreon, but you want to give me a little financial support for this video, it's always appreciated. You can give me a super thanks. I think they're super thanks or super comments down in the comments below. You can give me a little tip, which I always really appreciate. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart from watching. I appreciate all of you, and I love to hear from you. So until next time, go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody. I don't know. Okay.